Now I'm appealing to the math folk. We made our case, or I made my case with my hypothetically here wife. You know, she's here. It's a lot going on. And now I'm going to read just one chapter. It's a pretty short chapter in this book, and it does a great job of establishing mathematically why I'm pretty sure you will chuckle if you really think that God asked all of the sacrifices presented in Leviticus to Israel when Moses left. I mean, he has 2 stone tablets have 10 whole commands, but somehow the other 603 were like, you know, just written down like on, I don't know, what, 1.5 miles worth of stone tablets if it took 2 of them to just contain 10 commandments. Okay. I mean, that's just the way my brain thinks. Okay, so I'm going to the chapter. It's chapter 10. It's called Sacrifice in the Desert. This book is called The Ebionites. And it's like, this is a book, I'm not going to tangent, but where's the orange book? Let me see the orange book. When I was actually searching for this book, and I found that I won the bid, I went to go to Amazon and get some other book, and I found customers also bought The Ebionites. And I remember going, a whole book on the Ebionites? That's great. I know about them, but I've never seen a whole write-up on them. How much is a book? $20? Okay, cool. I just spent, I don't know, 1,000,000 times that for this other book. I'll get this one for 20. This book actually arrived about a week or 2 before this book. And asked me why when I came, and I was like, let me just read a couple of pages. It was like 72 hours later, and I was like, I can't put it down. It's so fascinating. How did I never know this? How can I not think of this? Of course it doesn't make any sense. How are you gonna get 600,000 bulls inside of a 500 square foot apartment? Oh man, I didn't think of it. Sorry, God. I should have busted out the calculator long ago. But let me read this chapter, because what I'm gonna do is talk about some plot holes. Okay. And then next we're gonna talk a little bit about Acts, the book of Acts, that's quoting Amos, where Stephen, or maybe James, but Stephen is actually essentially referencing the same thing we've been referencing all evening. The Mosaic Law, this is chapter 10, it's called Sacrifice in the Desert. And it's only like 2 or 3 pages, so it's not super long.
What's the name of the book again? It's
called The Ebionites by John. Oh, Dino, please don't fry me. So he's Serbian, and my friend Dino's Serbian, and Dino's last name is Vujicic. But when I asked him how to say this Serbian dude's name, Vujicic, he told me, and then I forgot. I think it's Vujicic. I think John Vujicic. Don't fry me, John, if I'm butchering your name. But it's called The Ebionites. Their Christology, soteriology, and vegetarianism defended. Essentially, he makes the case that this group of people had a very different view of who Jesus was than the establishment church. They also had a very different view of soteriology, salvation, and the concept of the studies of the doctrines of their day. And they also had a very different opinion on diet as it relates to the just the culture that they lived around.
Can you hold up the book?
Yeah, I can hold it up.
So I can take a screenshot.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be backwards. It's going to be backwards, but you can do it. You can do that. Yeah, I'm going to do it just like this. I'm going to try to get both cameras in at the same time. It is backwards, but if you can take a screenshot, you can flip it inside of, your Photos app.
Have you let them know that this will also be on YouTube?
Yeah, it'll also be on YouTube. Mm-hmm, we're gonna do that. So
don't worry, this will be easily accessible later.
Y'all, if y'all are interested in you can come sit over here, baby. You don't have to be off camera the whole episode. I can handle.
Okay.
If y'all really want to see, if y'all want a juicy book that's gonna be like, it's like the theological version of like a romance novel or something. It's nothing about romance. It's really just a tale about the beliefs of these groups of people and some details regarding the context of their life. But like, talk about, I was thoroughly enthralled when I first got this book. I've read it 3 times now, but I literally finished the book and I was like, I'm starting back at the beginning. I'm reading the whole book again. I did. So it says, sacrifice in the desert. The Mosaic Law. Hey, buddy.
See, that's what I'll be on the other side. See, today's just baby duty.
Hey, buddy, baby duty today.
That's
okay.
Baby duty.
All right. Daddy been running his whole entire mouth this whole entire time.
I'm like reading your questions and stuff. Yeah. So if I
Yeah.
get your attention. If it's a good time to
Yeah,
say the question.
no, totally. Okay, I'm gonna read it kind of quick. I'm gonna try to give it some life, try to be a good orator. I'm gonna sit a little closer to the mic so that my reading voice is a bit magnanimous, if you will. The Mosaic Law is replete with injunctions, ordinances, and commands which were to regulate the sacrificial system. And again, before we get too far, he makes the entire case, this whole entire book, that the sacrificial system was not a part of the original Torah of Moses, and the Ebionites espouse this as their friends and fellow believers also wrote, and as their haters wrote about them, which is how you notice it is what they believe, if even their haters said that they believe it too.
Just before you continue, someone was asking if you can hold up the book again, but also just to let you know that this also will be on YouTube.
Just comment the name. I mean, I'll be happy to hold the book out. I will.
And then also the other book is someone else was saying.
Good luck finding it. It's called Moses and the Original Torah by Abba Hillel Silver. You see Silver,
Yes.
That's his last name.
And we will give a list later of
We'll give a list, yeah. But I think I might have actually got the last copy in the world. So there's that.
You're going to have to...
I'm going to have to take some photos or whatever. It's got to be public domain now, right? The Mosaic Law is replete with injunctions, ordinances, and commands which were to regulate the sacrificial system. These commands and laws concerning the bloody sacrificial cart were supposedly given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. This author is a vegan. I'm not personally vegan, but vegetarian. But this author is vegan, so he says, I'm vegan, and I maintain that God never gave these commands, and that these laws were later interpolated and written by the lying scribes. The church, on the other hand, maintains that every word in the Mosaic Law is inspired and was actually commanded by God and written down by his servant Moses. Even the ones that say, and then Moses died, Moses also wrote those words. But therefore, I'm going to stop inserting my anecdotes into his book. Therefore, in this chapter, I intend to give irrefutable evidence and absolute proof that these passages in the Mosaic Law were not originally spoken by God, nor were they a part of the original writings of Moses. They are later forgeries and false pericopes by the lying scribes. Keeping in mind that the lying scribes have had control over the text cumulatively longer than any of the righteous priests of Aaron or Zadok. Just so we're clear. In order to prove my point and demonstrate beyond refute that the sacrificial cult was no part of the book of the law Moses wrote, it is necessary to demonstrate to the reader certain facts which will prove that the priests did not and could not have dealt with all those injunctions and ordinances they were to regulate the could not have dealt with all the injunctions and ordinances which were to regulate the sacrificial cult in the desert. Let us begin with the text of Leviticus 17. Here we are told that every sacrifice which the Israelites offered to God had to be brought to the altar, which was situated at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priests alone were allowed to officiate the altar. They were to slaughter the victim and sprinkle the blood against the altar. Then they were to burn the fat for a, quote, pleasing aroma to the Lord. In Leviticus 4:11 through 12, we are told that wherever a sin offering was made by the priest, which was a daily and constant service, the skin of a bullock and all of his flesh, even the whole bull or bullock, it says, shall he, the priest, carry forth without the camp or outside of the camp unto a clean place where the ashes are poured out, and burn him on the wood of fire. Leviticus 4:11 through 12. The tabernacle, or the tent of meeting, or the mishkan, was situated in the midst of the camp. The bullock was to be slaughtered on the altar, which was situated at the entrance to the tabernacle, and then it was to be carried by a priest to a place outside of the camp then it was to be carried by a priest to a place outside of the camp. In order to visualize this incredible scenario and the impossibility of this, it is necessary to demonstrate to the reader just how large the camping ground was and how far the bull had to be carried. Please carefully listen to all the evidence presented, since this will prove beyond refute that the commands in the Mosaic Law concerning sacrifices and offerings were not and could not have been given by God, nor were they performed in the desert, just like Jeremiah said. Okay. Did you perform these in the wilderness when you left the house, or when you left Egypt, O house of Israel? Okay. How large was the community? Now, this was the thing that hit me. This is why I resonate so much with this book, because I had these same questions. I just was kind of like, huh? And doing my own math in Sweden at the time, going, this is such a beautiful temple. I didn't really look at how you described to make it. But when I look, this is beautiful, man. Like, this is great. Like, Father, I know you're the author of all living things and all things beautiful, but this is actually prettier as a visual than I ever thought it was, just from my childhood. And now I'm glad I'm looking, because it's very pretty, but I don't understand how you want it to be bloodied, like literally the next day after it's built. Hey, bro, you might have to take him out. Hey, buddy. Oh, you don't want to, you over it? You spent? Is that what it's called? You through? You up to here with it? I get it. You over there talking about, I get it. I do. Okay, but continuing. How large was the community? Well, the Jewish Pentateuch, and again, Pentateuch, if you hear him say that, it's equivalent mostly in terms of the Torah, because the Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible. That is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those 5 books comprise the Pentateuch, and the Pentateuch is kind of interchangeable as a term with the Torah, which were the instructions of God given to Moses in the 5 books of Moses that comprise the Pentateuch, okay? Even though somebody wrote Moses died. But in the Jewish Pentateuch, it says that at the time of the Exodus from Egypt, there were 603,550 men alone. Please note Exodus 12:37. The children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot who were men besides children. This number is also confirmed in Numbers 11:21. The census taken in the wilderness in the 2nd year from the date of the Exodus confirms that there were actually 603,550 male soldiers who were 20 years and older. Numbers 1:45-47 says this. So all those who were numbered of the children of Israel by their fathers' houses from 20 years old and upward, all who were able to go out to war in Israel, even all those who were numbered, were 603,550. But the Levites, after the tribe of their fathers, were not numbered among them. And that was because the Levites were supposed to be like priests and the spiritual protectors, so they kind of like held them back from going to war. That this figure is correct can be verified by the text of Exodus 38:25-26. The silver of those who were numbered of the congregation was 100 talents, and the silver of the congregation, the silver of those numbered who were among the congregation was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels, after the shekel of the sanctuary. A beka, a head, that is half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary, for everyone who passed over to those who were numbered from 20 years old and upward, for 603,550 men. There were 3,000 shekels to a talent. Therefore, 100 talents and 1,775 shekels comes exactly to 603,550 half shekels. 3,000 times 100 is 600,000 half shekels. 1,775 shekels equals 3,550 half shekels. 600,000 plus 3,550 is 603,550. That's now 3 places we're told that 603,550 men by themselves came out of Egypt into the wilderness with Moses to the Exodus. When 22,000 Levites who were later counted, and all the women and children are included, as well as those males who were outside of the conscription for war age, just outside of military age, the Israelites must have numbered about 3 million in all. This is quite a conservative figure and is readily confirmed by most Bible commentators as well as the Jewish Encyclopedia. In addition to this figure, Exodus 12:38 says that there was also a multitude of strangers who went out with the Israelites and a large number of herds of flocks. In Exodus 12, a mixed multitude went up also with them, with flocks, herds, and even very much cattle. Okay, so you got 603,550 men, plus their wives and children, plus the 22,000 Levites, plus all the men who are too old or too young to be in war, plus the mixed multitude, however big or small that was. 3 million is probably conservative, because if every man only had one wife and one child, we're still talking pushing 2 million just by that, right? Yeah, 1,800 or something, a little over 1.8 million rather, or a little over. It would be a waste of time to speculate how many strangers there were with him. All we can say with certainty is that there were many, or a multitude, as the Hebrew word implies. But we can get a fairly good idea of how many sheep and goats were with them. Exodus 12 says that the Israelites observed the Passover in the land of Goshen. For their meal, they were commanded to either use a lamb or a goat. The same Hebrew word is used for both kinds of animals. The lamb was to be of the first year, a 1-year-old lamb, allowing liberally 10 people in a family per lamb, the lamb was supposed to be a year old. Okay, so allowing liberally for 10 people in a family per lamb, the Israelites would have to have required 300,000 lambs for the first year in order to observe their first Passover in Egypt. All they're saying there, in case y'all are lost with all the wordiness, is that based on the fact that it's basically like 3 million people, in a very, very conservative estimate. That doesn't mean anything political. It just means it might have been 9 million, but we'll say 3 billion, since that just is an easier number to wrap your head around. And it's still incredulous even with 3 million. All he's saying that is, if you were to take and consider that 10 people would be consuming or part of the ritual sacrifice of one lamb, or 10 people per household per lamb, we're still talking 300,000 lambs of the first year in order to observe their first Passover. They would also have required this number of lambs each succeeding year in the wilderness. Every year, you got to come up with another 300,000 1-year-old lambs. Meaning every year, all y'all cattle got to at least have some lambs. And the lambs can't just be any lambs. They got to be perfect. They would also be required to have this number of lambs each succeeding year in the wilderness, since the Jewish Pentateuch says they kept on observing the Passover in the desert. In addition, they would have needed a myriad of other animals for all their multiple sacrifices prescribed in the book of Leviticus. For there to be some 300,000 lambs of the first year, a flock of about 3 million to 4 million sheep and goats was required. In addition to this, the Exodus text says that many bovine animals went out with them. We have no way of determining the size of this herd except that it was very large. The camping ground. Did it ever occur to you just how big a space did the Israelites need every time they wanted to set up their camp? The Jewish Pentateuch clearly shows that the Israelites lived in tents, and that they erected and dismantled them every time they stopped to lodge as they traveled through the wilderness. In order to accommodate only for the Israelites, you would need about 300,000 tents. Each tent would have to be 5 by 5 meters, and that would occupy an area of about 25 meters squared, packing 10 people in each tent. So what he's doing is he's saying, let's take the sheer amount of people and the size of the campground that they would need to be in to hold this many people. If we're putting everyone shoulder to shoulder, chest to chest, booty to booty, in a tent, in the wilderness, and the tent was only 5 by 5 meters, right? I'm 2.5 meters myself. I can basically, 2 of me can lay down in either direction, and that's the whole of this particular tent. Packing 10 persons in each tent, the tent would occupy an area of about 25 meters squared. Thus, 300,000 tents would cover an area of 7.5 million meters squared. But I have not allowed a single square meter for walking tracks. The area covered takes only into account 300,000 tents pitched next to one another, edge to edge, like butt to front, 300,000 tents, 10 people in each tent, nobody can pee, there's no bathrooms, none of that yet. And we're still talking 7.5 million square meters, okay? Keep up. Some space was also required to accommodate the tabernacle, or the tent of meeting, which was an area for the congregation to gather in front of the tabernacle. In order to accommodate all the Israelites in the tabernacle with some walking tracks, an area of some 10,000 kilometers squared would be required. But you also must provide an area for the multitude of strangers who were with the Israelites. You also must provide an area for some 3 to 4 million flocks. If you were to pack 2 sheep in 1 square meter, like literally 2 whole sheep inside of a meter, you would need 1.5 million square meters to accommodate 300 million sheep. Just so that you can get your 300,000 sheep that are 1 year old for next year, just so that you can sacrifice 1 lamb per household of 10 people for just one of the many sacrifices that Israel had in the Old Testament. Okay, so this is an area, this zone that he's adding up. This is an area of 1,500 kilometers squared. Add this to the multitude of cattle and you will just see how large the camp was. Remember, the altar was situated at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and the sanctuary was situated in the midst of the camp. The three tribes were commanded to camp on each side of the tabernacle, Numbers chapter 2. The priest, therefore, would have had to drag the bull kilometers away from the altar in order to burn it outside of the camp. Now, there were myriads of other sacrifices the priest had to perform, as described in Exodus 29 and the first 7 chapters of Leviticus. Likewise, every woman who gave birth was required to present a lamb for a burnt offering and a pigeon for a sin offering at the end of her purification period, which is like the zone of time after you have the baby. In the Jewish Pentateuch, it says that all those who were 20 and over died in the wilderness except Joshua and Caleb. But since the census in the 40th year shows that the number was basically the same as the second year, you can imagine how many births there must have been and how many sacrifices the priest would have had to offer for each woman at the end of her purification period. It is estimated that at least 2 million people died in the desert, and therefore there must have been an additional 2 million births to compensate for this loss. The births distributed over a period of 40 years would have resulted in some 300 births per day. The priest would have therefore been required to offer some 300 sacrifices each day for the women who needed their purification rites performed. This was in addition to all the other sin offerings, free will offerings, fellowship offerings, and the daily sacrifices presented each morning and evening. In addition, the priest had to burn incense and clean the holy place, eat the flesh. In addition, the priest had to burn the incense and clean the holy place, eat the flesh of the holy offerings in the holy place, prepare the showbread and replace it every 7th day. They also had to make special perfumes and myriads of oblations, bloodless sacrifices, oblations, bread and cakes which accompanied the many sacrifices. Just think for a moment. If it took one priest to kill, clean, wash, burn, and sprinkle the blood against the altar, if it only took that one priest just 15 minutes, he could only perform 48 sacrifices in the space of 12 hours. Okay? 96 in the case in 24 hours, but it's supposed to do 300 a day. But 96 if he's working literally 24 hours around the clock, nonstop, only accounting for 15 minutes for each sacrifices with no lunch breaks, no bathroom breaks. I guess you don't totally need a lunch break if you're literally just eating the sacrificial meat all day, but what if you want to season it or like put some marinade or something on it? You know what I'm saying? You can't even do that. No time, right? You only hit, you didn't even hit a third of your quota for the day, just for the one purification ritual. Never mind the sin offering, never mind the free will to thank all other ones. To accomplish this task in a space of time, he could only perform 48 such sacrifices in the space of 12 hours. To accomplish this task in the space of time, he could not even take a moment off. But imagine if a priest had to stop his job in order to go to the toilet. He would have to walk kilometers to relieve himself, for it was commanded that no toilet could be situated within the borders of the camp. The Israelites had to relieve themselves outside the camp, Deuteronomy 23:12. Therefore, it follows that even if there were many priests, they could never manage to present all the myriads of sacrifices already described. But the crux of the matter is this. The Jewish Pentateuch says clearly that there were only 5 priests in the desert. Aaron and his 4 sons, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Shortly after their ordination, Nadab and Abihu were killed. The whole Israelite community thus was left with only 2 capable priests and their aged father, Aaron, who was over 80 years old at this point. Many misinformed people assumed that all Levites were priests and that they had a legitimate right to serve at the altar and present burnt offerings and other Jewish ritual sacrifices. This, however, was not the case. Most Bible scholars are aware of this fact, and they also are aware that no Levite was allowed to serve at the altar or ever in the holy place unless he belonged to the lineage of Aaron, the brother of Moses. The priestly duties were entrusted to Aaron and his 4 sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Initially, only these 5 were allowed to burn incense in the holy place and to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings at the sacrificial altar, which was situated at the entrance of the tabernacle. After the death of Abihu and Nadab, only Aaron and his 2 sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, were allowed to access the altar at the holy place. The other Levites were banned from the holy place and were forbidden to approach the altar. In fact, all Levites who were not of the lineage of Aaron were forbidden to even look at any holy object which was situated in the tabernacle. All of the descendants of Levi, whether through Gershon, Kohath, or Merari, were banned from the tabernacle and could carry the sacred objects of the tabernacle only after they were covered by the sons of Aaron, who alone acted as priests. Furthermore, all the other Levites could carry out their duties only under the supervision of the sons of Aaron. It is therefore evident that there were only 2 active priests and their aged father officiating in the desert. Where there would be 3 Aaronic priests, the only ones permitted to officiate at the altar, where would these 3 Aaronic priests, the only priests permitted to officiate at the altar and at the holy place, where would they find the time to take care of all of the myriads of sacrifices described in the Jewish Pentateuch? Where would they find the time to carry the skins of the bulls outside the camp to relieve themselves on a daily basis, since the camp was so large? Where would they find the time to eat all the holy offerings? Especially if you're eating all that meat, then you got to go take a dookie, but you got to hop on the Segway or hop in an Uber to get, halfway across town and get outside the giant camp they lived in, just because all the toilets were situated on the outside. Where would they find the time to eat all the holy offerings in the holy place? And how could 3 men eat so much flesh? On a certain occasion, Aaron and his sons did not eat the holy flesh of a goat, and Moses was supposedly furious with them. Anyone with an unbiased mind would immediately realize that no such sacrifices have taken place in the desert, and that in the camp of that enormous size and under the circumstances and conditions described in the Jewish Pentateuch, it's impossible. It is no wonder that God denies in Jeremiah 7:22, which we read earlier, that he ever instituted or commanded such sacrifices after the Israelites left Egypt. No wonder Stephen stated that the Israelites did not offer sacrifices to the true God in the desert. Acts chapter 7, verse 42 and 43. Okay, that's the end of the chapter. And in case it was a bit lost what he was explaining, he was giving a conservative estimate that an area about 7.5 million meters squared would be needed just to house the tents of just the men and a conservative estimate of their family that left Egypt. And then another area that's somewhere in the ballpark of 1,500 kilometers squared to incorporate all the animals that will be required, even at a minimum, like a small number, to do all these performance and sacrificial rituals. So I want y'all to be very clear that I don't have it here, and this phone over here is working, but if you hold Siri, this is what I would like you to do. Go find, if you live anywhere but like LA County or like New York County or whatever, Chicago County, any of the big cities don't work that great. But I live in Charlotte, right? Charlotte, North Carolina is a big-ish city. There's over 1 million people in Charlotte. Charlotte is in a county called Mecklenburg County. So when I hopped on my little Siri and said, Siri, how many square miles is 1,500 square kilometers? The answer, and please, I would love to really be able to I did write it down, but I think I left it on this other thing that's down. Anyway, I asked this the other night when I'm doing my notes. I go, how many square miles is 1,500 square kilometers? And the answer is somewhere in the ballpark of like 580 something or 560 something, somewhere in we'll round it down, say 500 square miles, okay? And then I said, and I live in Charlotte, which is in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. I said, what is the square mileage of Mecklenburg County? And the number, like, I believe that the math on this was somewhere in the ballpark of like 580 something square miles. And then Mecklenburg County was like 520 something square miles. So I'm sitting here going, okay, so I live at the bottom of Charlotte, in the southern side. And I know that in my car barreling down the highway at 70 miles an hour, it's going to take me like 30, 35, 40 minutes with no traffic at all. If I'm the only person on the highway and every light is green to get to the northern part of Charlotte. So Mecklenburg County is pretty large, and an area that's 500 or more square miles is pretty large. So if the Israelites and their giant multitude, keeping in mind, I'm talking 3, maybe 5, 6, 7 million. Charlotte's the biggest city in Mecklenburg County. It's only 1 point something million. So with more people than the entire city of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the surrounding areas by an order of magnitude, maybe 4 or 5, the tabernacle in the middle is where they're supposed to be performing all of these rites and rituals of the killing of these animals for atonement purposes. Only the ritual stated that you had to remove the entrails and the bowels and the feces outside of the camp, where your dookie had to go too. Ask me if I'm really trying to imagine that, 300 per day if we're just talking the purification birth rituals. Somewhere in the ballpark of 1,600 per day if we're talking one sin offering per family, per household, per year. Okay? Plus, let's just say we're talking about the sin offerings and the birthright. Not the free will, not the thing, not none of the rest of them. Okay, because there were several different types of sacrifices that the Levitical priests were prescribed to do if you look in Leviticus. But let's just go with just the sin offering and just the, hey, a new baby is born, so here's your purification rites. It's 300 plus about 1,600, 19 and some change round up. That's literally 2,000 animals all day. 2,000 animals per day for just 2 of the several types of sacrifices. And part of the injunction of that was that you have to, in the process of by hand, right? No machines. Definitely, we know that the temple had a much bigger drainage and fully elaborate system, but this is the tabernacle, tent of meeting, right? We're still talking in the wilderness. We're talking, you got to put it in a wheelbarrow and huff it from downtown Charlotte to doggone Mint Hill or Fort Mill or wherever, South Carolina, at the bottom edge. The Charlotte sits on the bottom edge of North and South Carolina. So if you keep driving in Charlotte, North Carolina, you'll hit an imaginary line that all of a sudden now you're in South Carolina. And from the edge of that line to the top edge of to the middle of the city, downtown, theoretically, is how far they would have to push the entrails for each of these bulls, right? We're not talking like seahorses. We're talking giant entire cattle all the way out in order to perform the rites according to what we're told. And when you really get down to the numbers, you're like, really now? That's what we're out here trying to believe that the Levitical priests were doing? Like no breaks to dookie, take a nap, nothing. 3 people performing this for the entire 3 million plus people, and they had to physically go the distance just to perform one animal's right all the way out. 2,000 of them per day. If we're just talking these 2 types of sacrifices, they had to go all the way out, all the way. Is this what we're talking about? It takes me from downtown to the bottom edge of Charlotte. We're probably talking, I could probably do it in 25 if I'm speeding, right? 25 minutes in a car driving 80 miles an hour on a highway. Okay, we're talking actual 20 miles or something like that. On foot. And then they had to burn the whole animal. Couldn't let any of it die. Had to consume. How long does that take in modern incineration technology? And we're out here really saying, oh, but they actually burned it all. They ate it all. 3 men ate all the animals that would have been 2,000 per day. Entire giant bull. I mean, most people get full off 1 T-bone steak, which is like 1 thigh muscle of 1 cow. But we're talking 3 people ate 2,000 plus cows worth of meat, or they sold it, or they burnt it. Come on, y'all. It's like the more you really actually work the numbers out, the more you're like, okay, this is impossible. That clearly couldn't have happened. And Jeremiah says, did you offer me this in the wilderness? Did y'all? I'm pretty sure you didn't. You see what I mean? So he essentially is saying, like, this is what I want you to do. Look, take 1,500 1,500 kilometers squared. You don't have your phones, right? 1,500 kilometers squared. And wherever the county that you live in, whatever city, whatever county, literally on Siri or ask Google or whatever, hold a button and say, Siri, how many square miles is the county that I live in? And then you say, how many square miles is 1,500 kilometers squared? And it'll tell you that number. So that number is going to be somewhere in the 500 and something ballpark. So then maybe you live in a small county, or maybe you live in a big county. Maybe you live in a county similar to mine where it was about the same roughly size. I just chuckled when I read that. I said, okay, got it. All right, God. It's getting clearer as I look into this and how I read this and just didn't do the math on this up to this point. I don't know. Because it was out of sight, out of mind, y'all. I didn't have to think about this because I wasn't doing no ritual sacrifice. That's what Jesus did. That's the priest. I don't know what that means. But my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Okay, so in closing, we're getting back here. Stephen, in Acts chapter 7. What verse is it? 42 and 43. I was like, this is pretty long. Let's actually get back. So this is Stephen making a charge before the corrupt leadership of his day. Never mind the fact that almost every scholar worth their salt, they're being pretty honest, will tell you that most likely Stephen didn't exist. In fact, they think it was James. They think that the story of what Stephen told them and how the whole experience went was actually kind of a true story, and that the parties involved, the certain men who set certain garments down at the feet of an individual, was really more about that individual kind of being the ringleader. When you read the same exact story in a different book that kind of is built from the same source text, only one took a little bit of a creative liberty to invent one of the few Greeks that ever could tell a Hebrew priest what the deal was, like read them their rights. He's totally Greek, they're totally Hebrew, but like, don't ask me why that makes sense. Whereas if it's truly James and not Stephen, it makes all the sense in the world why he was reading them their rights. Because James, Jesus' brother, knew exactly what the F was going on. I'm being a bit pejorative, but James did not take no punches. James was the homie. His name was Jacob. And yet King James just switched it up 1,500 years later. So you know him as James. Like I said, throwing shade on Jesus' family, yeah, it becomes real clear when you start diving through it. But James it makes a ton of sense for James to be reading these Pharisee high priests, they're right, or Sadducee high priests, reading them their number, so to speak. But this random Greek named Stephen, I guess, sure, okay, whatever. That's not the point. The point is, Stephen says here in Acts, then God turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets. Did you offer me slaughtered animals and sacrifices during the 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You also took up the tabernacle of Molech and the star of your god Remphan, images which you made to worship, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. So again, whether we're talking Stephen or James, doesn't matter. The point is, did you offer me slaughtered animals and sacrifices during the 40 years in the wilderness? I mean, it says that you did, but did you? Because is that a rhetorical question, or am I really out here about to get killed asking rhetorical questions that I already know the answer to? You see what I mean? Of course, it's an answer. The answer is no, they didn't. The problem is, and keeping in mind, Moloch being associated with who they're connecting this to. And I've already showed y'all what the star of Moloch, the star of Remphan, right? The star of your god Remphan. We'll go back over in case y'all weren't on this particular. I just go DuckDuckGo, type star of Remphan, Remphan, and I hit images, and this is what pops up on my screen. That's just me. I didn't boo it. Google did it. DuckDuckGo did it. The star of Remphan. Most people who've ever studied a bit of esoteric occult knowledge, Gnostic information, will properly point out that the hexagram has been the tool and the sigil for quite a long time that deals with invocation or evocation, one of those types of rituals, and that drawn on the floor with candles at each of the points provides a focused area for the energy that's being summoned to appear within, and they believe be contained within so that it doesn't just run amok and do whatever it wants to do. Their words, not mine. But ask me why we keep getting injunctions about the Star of Remphan, why that keeps happening, and why in 2023 you can still Google search that and it's not this nebulous confusion as to what star that looks like. That's all I want to know. Because all I'm really trying to subtly suggest so that the AI and the leadership that overruns all these internet webs can't shut what I'm saying down, but you can actually connect the dots on your own for who and what institution and what Esau-based leadership structure Stephen or James might have actually been talking about. Okay, so address... in recapping what I've talked about today, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna tell you, and then I'm gonna tell you what I told you. I have to tell you what I told you part. I'm really addressing and confronting this notion that God has to require blood. Like God has to require blood because it says it in this book that the Edomite priesthood managed. Okay, there's things that this says that I fully agree with. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. But it rightly dividing is a thing, right? So I really want to call people into a prayer. Like I want you to not take my word for this. If anything that I said today offends you, I want you to ask yourself why. Do I look like I'm intending to offend you? He's asleep. You can come over. Do I look like I'm intending to offend you? I'm really not. I'm not even being silly or facetious. I mean, I'm being a bit silly, but in this stage of the discussion, I'm inviting my wife, who's now detached from the teat, or the teat is detached from her, to come back over. But I hope that me and my silliness in my presentation was not offensive at all. I really do hope I did not offend you. And I really hope that what I'm saying, if you find it offensive, you ask yourself why. Because all I did was read to you a bunch of verses out of the Bible and illustrate to you the patterns that show that Israel was not saved by following the model that God said to follow to atone for sins. Israel didn't even believe the Messiah, the Navi Emet, to come through and say, follow this model. So the model given that we're told is given is challenged both in the text and even stronger outside of the text. And I just never knew that. I was always told it's infallible book to book. If something doesn't make sense, then it must be me. All right. Apparently Stephen got it right. He wasn't even Hebrew. So, I have this question right now. Do you require bloodletting from something innocent to forgive your own children? I've said this 1,000 times. I do believe that God gives us children so that we see a glimpse of him. Like I have a son now, and I sometimes just would be sitting up at like whatever o'clock in the morning looking at this kid and be like, especially when he can now look at me back in my eyes. And I'm looking at him and he looks at me making all these weird faces. And I'm like, wow, like there is nothing on earth that would require, that would compel me to kill you and call it loving. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's no kosher way.
There's no kosher way. There's no humane way to kill my child because I love someone else.
If you put it in perspective, if you have a family member that gets murdered, and then you're told later, well, it was done in a kosher way, is that going to make you be okay with it?
Right. Or feel any better about it? No. But this is what we're told. And I've been unpacking and doing what I call auditing my faith, which was different from her faith because I grew up with a glued and signed, sealed, delivered, and she didn't. But this is what we're led to believe is the reason that God sent his son specifically to die. I have a son, and all the love in the world that I might have for anybody out there would never in a million microseconds suggest that his death is something that I would desire. Especially if he was like, Father, please don't make me do this.
Take this cup from me.
Take this cup from me. You know what I'm saying? So.
Or do your will.
Now, I'm not saying Jesus didn't say that, right? But I'm just trying to reframe and recouch why Jesus said that. I don't believe he was talking to himself. And I don't believe God was like, nope, sorry, Jesus, la, 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 you got to do it. I can't forgive the world unless you do. No, I don't think it was that at all. I think it was the fact that he just side and allowed what he foreknew to happen so that the prophecies could be fulfilled, so that anybody paying halfway attention could actually listen to Yeshua, which was the whole thing they had to do to Jonah, listen to him and obey his words, which is exactly what they did to Yeshua. And therefore they repented, and that repentance brought salvation. Alien has a question. But hand me that tea, by the way, because talking for 5 hours, my whole entire throat is like, pause.
More like iced tea.
No, well, it was hot at first, and I was like, icy.
Oh, you should show the front.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Anyway.
So the last thing I'm going to say is this. People often take what I said this whole talk, and they will agree with me. Like when I say people, I mean, generally speaking, atheists, agnostics, or people who don't really have a strong Judeo-Christian dog in the fight, so to speak. They will take what I said and they'll be like, yeah, I agree with this guy. He makes a lot of sense. Therefore, I think X, Y, Z. And I say they see what I see, but they take the end result and couch it very different from the way that I do. So I want to be clear about how I couch this information so that nobody can go and just put words in my mouth and say that I mean something or said something that I don't say, or that don't mean rather, or didn't say. Most people who would hear what I say and not get triggered and agree with me would say, aha, see, therefore, the Old Testament God is evil. This guy was like, well, let me back up. They see the Leviticus injunctions for sacrifice, right? And they say, yeah, therefore God is evil, because look what he wants. He wants you to kill all these animals and innocent, and that's like, that sounds mean. Therefore God is evil. I don't think God is evil at all. In fact, I think he's the definition of love. Others might say, well, okay, the Old Testament God is evil, but we're juxtaposing that against the New Testament grace-filled Jesus God, okay? And I've seen many people say this. I mean, the Old Testament God wanted blood, he wanted killing, he wanted murder. The New Testament Jesus God, he's so nice. He just wants mercy, grace. Everybody get to go to heaven because they just believe. Anybody who believes, everyone who believes gets to go. Everyone. In fact.
And everyone do as thy wilt, right? With that type of couching.
Right. Everybody can do whatever you want to. You just got to believe it. Don't ask me what believe means in Greek or Hebrew, because we talking English now. But you got to believe it. Just believe it. Okay, as long as you believe it, then you're good. It's the Old Testament God. You have to do stuff with rules. The New Testament God is different. That's how a lot of people couch this too. And I disagree with that too. I don't think God is evil or the Old Testament God is evil at all. I think that people who say that are just seeing this plot hole, if you will, in the narrative for what it is, without the conditioning. The conditioning is what causes people to get offended. Like, how dare you? Something has to die. Well, why? If your son disobeyed you and you wanted, or he asked for forgiveness, would you require that something die in order for him to forgive you? Well, no, but God does. But why does God require that? Why would he? Doesn't that seem antithetical to the author of life? And don't you think that God cares for the animals because he clearly states throughout the Torah and elsewhere that he does?
And also the son, because, I mean, if it's his favorite pet or his favorite animal, and then you have to kill it.
Right. It's got to be a perfect one, not even a blemish one, right? So why would God? Well, because he requires it. He has to require it. He says he does. He said, the covenant says that if you sin, death comes. So because God can't actually create a consolation thing, or because that has to mean this only way we're allowed to interpret this, therefore, billions, trillions at this point of innocent things, living souls who have families, parents, and siblings in their own species have to suffer through mourning, and the actual animal has to die in agony, kosher or not, because you screwed up. Not because the animal did anything wrong, because you did. Plus, it's like, if we're talking in the Jesus model, hey, Jesus, I know I offended you. I know I deserve death, but I'm thankful that you died instead, so I don't have to die. I mean, because from the flip side of that, it's like, hey, kid, I asked you to follow my rules, and you didn't. And in fact, look, you offended me for not doing it. But you know what? It's cool. I'm just let them kill me. I'm just die. And then you'll be forgiven for the fact that you offended me by God. That's what we're asked to believe, y'all. I know it sounds silly, but that's what we asked to believe. Now, I know you might not have ever heard somebody challenge the notion of Jesus in this way, but please understand. I've heard it already. Oh, Chris is denying Jesus. Let me pump the brakes for a second. In case you didn't hear our first installment, I have done nothing but say that Jesus is the most important figure on earth. He is the individual I believe that we should be looking to model our life after and follow and heed his words. He is the Messiah. Messiah is just not a magic word that means equal to God, but he is the Messiah. You can call him the Christos if you want to use the Greek term that was initially associated with Mithras, because the Greeks don't have Messiah in their language. We'll go with that. He's the Christ. Okay, the chosen one, the anointed one. To save the sins of Israel? Sure, but not in a ritual blood sacrifice atonement model, because that didn't stop the sins of Israel even with an actual lamb. He came to correct the record and the actions of Israel so that in following him, Israel would be saved. They didn't heed his word, but greater Israel is in the process of doing that. We're not going to get into it tonight about who/what greater Israel is. Just know that when Jesus is asked, hey, what's up? I don't come for the Gentiles. I'm coming for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's who Jesus said he was coming for. Now, I do believe that that's millions, probably even billions at this point, of people who are not classically Jewish or who do not identify with being from the tribe of Judah. But that's because the tribe of Judah was over here, right? That's where the term Jew comes from. And the tribe of Israel, the northern house of Israel that, like we know, scattered by and large, they're still Israel, remember? And those lost sheep of the house of Israel, that's who Jesus said he was talking to. Now, do I know where they live? No, I think they live all over the world and they're concentrated in different places. But
They probably don't even know themselves.
they probably don't even know themselves. And the lost sheep of the house of Israel is who Jesus said he was coming to. So unless your pastor or pope or priest knows more than Jesus, I might just go with what Jesus said on why he came. And I really think that people don't see the schism that has been created by instituting this proxy atonement model and having that totally not work out for Israel the whole time, and then having Jesus and all his disciples and the entire Ebionites that are written about everywhere who disagree with this, middle finger the whole system just so that Jesus can be the biggest representative of that system that they all agree was illegitimate. Okay, so this is why we've come to this full circle, because we're now sitting here like, okay, got it. They really do have America on a whole entire Babylon thing. The world, in fact, on a whole entire Babylon model. And from what I can tell, if we're worshiping this sacrifice as equal to God, like a dead God that is living, but according to Hebrews, technically a testament doesn't kick in until the signer of the testament dies. Somebody had replied to me in a rebuttal to our first video about Hebrews. It says right here, blood is required, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, are you reading what you just sent? It's literally calling God dead. And you want to tell me, first of all, who wrote Hebrews? Can you tell me? I didn't think so. Nobody knows. Some people do, but that's only really recently. You don't even know who wrote it. And you're using that as a means to override what I'm saying the Torah and the prophets are saying? Really? Plus, did you read it? Did you read the verse? Because if you read it, it would be very clear to you that the author, whoever that is, of Hebrews is associating God being dead with the activation of this testament. You know how, like, your grandmother's will and testament doesn't activate until your grandmother dies? Yeah, that's how a testament works. So for Old Testament or New Testament to be viable, a testament only is in effect if the author of that testament is dead. So whether you're trying to consider Jesus as God being dead or God as Yahweh being dead, either way, I don't know if you want to do that for the author of the living God and the author of life, because that's not the way it seems to me. The author of life don't need to be dead for any sort of covenant of reconciliation to be activated.
And then he was resurrected even.
Say what?
Then he was resurrected. So he
right,
died.
but if I sacrifice a lamb and then the lamb blood pours out and 3 days later the lamb comes back together and starts walking, I might be like, ooh, Eleazar, give me another lamb in here. This one rose back up. I don't know if that really counts. You see what I'm saying? It's like the logic falls completely out because we're just told this Roman Jesus equals God as a bull sacrifice. It's like they're literally calling Jesus an animal, and y'all don't see that. Y'all take that as a term of endearment. You're saying the same thing that the murderers of Jesus said. Please let his blood be over us and our children. Y'all say that as a term of endearment. Jesus, please pour your blood on me. Wash in the blood. Yeah. You see what I mean? I'm not trying to pick on y'all because I was singing the same songs too. That's why I can make fun, because it was me. I'm making fun of me. I'm not making fun of you. I'm making fun of historical me. Decade and a half ago me. So Christians usually take this when somebody says, "Oh, wait, hold on."
You were right here, I think.
Well, yeah. I just basically said people will see what I said about the God of the Old Testament requiring all this blood and sacrifice and be like, yes, seems mean. Or see, God of the Old Testament is mean and the New Testament God is great. But no, what y'all are witnessing is a plot hole. And that plot hole being, it's not really a plot hole. I'm just calling it a plot hole because the plot hole is when the main protagonist and the main storyteller is the writer is trying to get the main character from A to Z, and they can't do it. So they have to just be like, and she ended up here. Well, hold on now, plot hole. I thought they were here, but now that's a plot hole. This plot hole is, this thing's supposed to be infallible, but Jeremiah says this and Leviticus says that. So which one is it? Acts says this. Jesus says this, but Deuteronomy says that. So which one is it? That's the plot hole I'm speaking of. People just don't realize they're pointing out the plot hole for what it is without the conditioning. So anybody who doesn't feel some type of way about it, it doesn't have that conditioning like I was given in my childhood. It's like, no, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's like, God required this. It has to be. But Jesus was that. Jesus was God's blood sacrifice for your sins. But Jesus and his crew was saying that animal sacrifice for sin is not a thing. So calling him the lamb just because Enoch had a whole entire metaphor that was not related to a hypothetical future Jesus being the sins of the world, but that this pure innocent thing would come and innocence would return to Israel. Like, okay, like y'all just went, that was like Olympic level long jump, talking about jumping to conclusions, but that's what we were all given. That's what we were all given. We inherited the lying pen of the scribes. So the state of so Christians, okay, so people who would say what I was saying earlier, that's usually non-Christians or agnostics, former Christians, right? Most Christians who are active believers would usually take this to mean that the unsaved state of this person is blinding them from seeing what God has revealed to them, a true believer. Okay, that, no. There's a righteous reason for this. God just literally needed the death of all these innocent things before he could be right standing. Because your sin makes you dirty, which is true. But because you're spiritually, theoretically dirty, even though I just hopped out the shower, I have to go kill this other animal and physically actually get dirty before my sins are clean, even if I've already been walking a life of repentance and teshuva since my sin. He doesn't care about my actual sin. He needs me to literally go and kill this animal before I'm back in right standing. You see what I'm saying? It's like, So in conclusion, this is my final point, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. And if there's any final questions, I'll probably try to take one pretty quickly. Conclusion, explain why I'm going to explain why I'm framing it this way. So when I clarify the New Testament association of what Jesus is saying versus what someone else was saying, which is what next week is about, it's crystal clear who is on the side of the Most High and the prophets and who is on the side of the Roman state. Priests, prophets. Sorry to block your face. Priests, prophets. Prophets, always on the side of the Most High. I mean, except for Balaam, but basically.
The only way they can be prophets even.
Bingo. On the side of the Most High. Priests, totally ready to capitulate to the state and say whatever needs to be said to get that money, to get money, get paid, okay? So we're at the end of this discussion, but I set it up like this because the first week we talked about Jesus, who he wasn't and who he was, who he said he was versus who others said he was. Kind of a New Testament-centric discussion. The second week, we talked about the Bible, the physical book, how we got it, how it went through the different iterations, and how we ended up where we are today. And we introduced the idea, not even idea, the reality, that priests and priesthoods don't always end you up in the most righteous territory, textually speaking, or in practice. Tonight was about stepping back to the first century and saying, hey, listen, the reason I was able to say what I don't think Jesus is because I don't think this sacrifice system was what y'all think it was. And I've seen books and books and books and references and verses and prophets and all these different touch points to make that case. Because next week, we're making the case that a separate writer, an individual that is not Jesus, has a doctrine that deviates and is different from Jesus's, particularly as it relates to salvation. And that doctrine is what has overtaken the words of Jesus, not because Jesus couldn't handle his own words, but because the state management and the state propaganda has elevated the words of someone else and the theme of someone else over the instructions of Jesus. And the interesting thing is that someone else was basically Edomite. Yeah, that someone else does claim to be Jewish, but a lot of Jewish rabbis, even today, scoff at that idea and laugh at it, particularly because of how much the Greek scriptures were relied on for this someone else to make their point. I'm going to leave it a bit open-ended tonight, but what I'm hoping to do is show y'all that in the Old Testament, there is option A, do what the Most High says. Option B, do what the kings of the priests of the leadership structure of Judea said to do. And here you go. You got these two options. And you saw as a historical example of what happened to this one group of people, this one family of Israel, when they took this option and not the option the Most High was given. Next week, we're going to be talking about in the New Testament, you got the same thing. You got two options laid right before you. And most people don't see it because they're taught to synthesize everything. They're taught to take something that John said and clarify what Mark was saying, or clarify what Matthew was saying, but John was the only one who was actually there. And, or I should maybe have given that example vice versa, but we're taught to not just look at John's book for John's book, look at Jude for Jude, look at James for James, look at, Peter for Peter. We're taught to like glue it all together and read it all as if it's one book because it totally makes sense, even though it, in some cases, absolutely does contradict itself. We're literally gaslit and told, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You're wrong. I know it says this here and this here, but you wrong. Jeremiah can't be wrong and Leviticus can't be wrong. You wrong. But I'm just reading what Jeremiah said. I did not speak to your fathers concerning sacrifices. But you a heretic. God doesn't love you. Change the subject. That's usually what you get met with the second you hit people with too much logic in their face. So I'm trying to be nice and humble and trying to tell y'all I don't have it all figured out. Neither does she. But we are at a place where we're reset and we're baseline enough to be like, okay, got it. There is a trick, and that trick is kind of thorough. And that thorough trick has kind of made itself thorough through every industry that I can tell, right? The trick that's happening in the entertainment industry is pretty thorough. The trick that's happening in the banking industry, the usury that this country is built on, is pretty thorough. The trick that's happening in the food and agriculture industry is pretty thorough. The technology, what's really happening with the networks raining around your body and what's going on through digitally speaking in terms of the technology going on, that trick is pretty thorough. What's going on with our education or miseducation system, the literary text who controls all the thought of the world today, is pretty thorough. So if you really want to sit here and not think that the most popular religion of all time with the most adherents of any religion on earth today, the specific category of social control that has more influence over people, more than pharmaceuticals or politics or anything like that, religion. If y'all really want to sit there and think that the religious industry doesn't have a pretty thorough and well fleshed out hustle going on, I got news to tell you. You were mistaken. Ooh, oh yeah. So, do you have anything else to add, baby? Because I done said it all.
Well, earlier you were saying, is this, if your child ever did something they weren't supposed to do, would you ask them to, sacrifice or kill something to, so that you could forgive them? Then also, and you've said this, Chris, before, how then imagine a child, because we're told to become like children, right? If a child, would consider killing an animal, I mean, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but a child would see like a fluffy rabbit or something like that. Do you think that they would want to, kill it or be okay with that? If a child isn't okay with it, then maybe that's something to consider. I remember when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I was, this is just an example, I was eating a sandwich, and I was living in Sweden at the time, and it was ham on the sandwich, and I asked my mother, what does this come from? And she told me that how you have to kill a pig to get the ham, and that really made me really sad, and I started crying. That was the first time I ever understood how we got what we got. And so as from the heart of a child, an innocent child, what would be their perspective, right?
Oh, I got you. I got long arms, so don't worry about it. Oh.
So not only to think about how you would forgive your child, but also how would you see the world through the eyes of a child?
I know this bright brown.
Oh,
he's over
tired.
Like, it's so
Maybe
bright. Y'all got the studio lights on.
No, he's super. He hasn't slept.
I know. I'm
much
holding
the
you
last few
good.
hours. But so
I'm a good daddy.
you know,
I ain't
because
passing my kids to no fire to Moloch or nothing.
Right.
Okay.
No. That the father. What was the saying again? Or is that the burden is.
My yoke is easy and my
easy,
burden is light.
And my burden is light. And it's as easy as a child could, supposed to be
hello.
as.
Jerk City.
A child should be able to understand, right? So that's just something to think about. Ponder on.
We done, baby. Close it on out. Baby.
Okay.
He going.
He's so
Y'all done yet? God dog, I'm ready to go to sleep. That's what the baby saying. All right.
But just thank you so much for
If
sitting
y'all
here.
have been listening, did you see Aileen's? I didn't see any questions. Sorry if we missed your question. It's kind of long. Maybe we should do like a questions episode where we don't like introduce nothing new. We just ask.
Jeremiah 2:13.
Okay.
What was that?
Jeremiah 2:13. You gotta. I can't type it in and hold it. Baby.
I can. I can.
Okay.
Hold on. I got it.
All right, once you hit the tab, we're gonna see. Y'all, thank y'all for listening. Like, again, my heart in this whole endeavor is that we just freshen up and re-illustrate the story of the Bible, because it is the most successful and important book on earth, right? So there is for sure wisdom in it, and there's a whole beauty in really reading it. And so I would never tell anybody not to read the Bible or to ignore the Bible. I would also simply just say, just allow, when I was a bit sad when I learned it wasn't infallible, but I kind of lost that sadness a bit when I realized, okay, got it. It's still as beautiful for me as it's always been. And even if it isn't infallible, even though I was like saved under the Bible, I memorized it. It was the whole foundation of my whole life. The discouragement was short-lived because I was able to realize that it was always this way. And the Most High's protected us all through it anyway, which to me is the miracle. Not that it was like immaculately preserved in the 13 variations that don't agree, that it was saved. And the sentiment of it was found to be beautiful, and the Ruach can actually work with the parables in it, despite what Edom has done to the actual textual record.
So, can I read that real quick?
Yeah.
This is Jeremiah 2:13. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewn themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. That has actually a different meaning to me right now than I'm thinking about. I mean,
in fact, I know you like.
Yeah.
Well.
Water
versus blah, blah, blah,
Yeshua's words, Jesus' words, is supposed to be like living water. Like how his word is going to lead to eternal life. His instructions that were given to him
tired, bro.
through the Father. So that's why we do focus on him, and we try to walk out life as much as we can through his instructions that were given by the Most High Yahweh. And so, you know, the words, the true words, are like living water. Like at the when Jesus was at the well meeting the Samaritan woman, he said, "I will give you water that you will never thirst again. I will give you water that will give you life."
He ain't saying nothing about I'm gonna give you my blood. You just gotta believe in it and wash yourself in it. He said, I'm gonna give you water. There you go. Amen. And that's how the sermon go. So the thing is blinking. It's about to end in 2 seconds. But you know, in the church I grew up, I read the verse earlier. I think it was in Hosea. He has shown thee, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of thee, but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God, right? So the church I went to, the church I went to, had a ritual, kind of a practice where every time the sermon ended, the singers would get up as people are starting to put their jackets on and get ready to go, and they would say, all right, singers, take us out. He has shown thee, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of thee? But to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with my God. All right, everybody. Y'all have a good night. We'll see you at church later tonight. It always ended like that. So that verse right there, I love that verse. That means church is done. He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of thee? But to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And so for this, that's a great way to end it. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you for sticking around and listening. And this is going to be on YouTube at some point. I will share a link once it's up. But you can go to youtube.com/Swedish, SWEEDISH, to find the other 2 videos that we've done before this one. And then keep an eye out for the next this one.
If y'all think this week was bad, y'all not gonna like it next week.
Next week is going to be. I'm gonna be sweating.
I'm not. I'm like this next week. I'm talking about something that I've kept my lips shut for 9 years on.
I'm glad
because I just felt that it wasn't the time, and now I'm at a place where I feel like it's the time. So join us next week. We'll see you guys again. And thank you all for everything. X3, excited about X3 Nina. I saw your comments popping up randomly. Thank you for your feedback and for your time. I mean, we've been talking to you for a while, so thank you for listening. We really do appreciate. Message us, DM us, comment us. I'm not interested in fighting with nobody. If you disagree, you can either keep scrolling or provide me where Jeremiah meant what he apparently didn't mean in verse 722. But I'm not saying that I don't want to hear anybody's opinions. I'm just saying right now we're in a season where we're trying to get off our chest a great bulk of information that we've learned. And so we want to be integritous to that. And then we'll start engaging more publicly in a back and forth. But for right now, it is what it is. And y'all, thank y'all for having a great patience with me and this baby that's asleep in the midst of my arm. And I think it's just Dookie. Oh, my arm is getting hot and warm. Plus, I hear the burp coming. Oh, Lord, get the burp back. It was either a blow or hit the button.
Yes, thank you so much. We'll see you soon again.
I ain't got no boobies, baby, but I'm still great. I got features. I ain't got no titties, but I got features.
I don't do this often enough.
You ain't got long enough arms, baby. Oh, Lord, it's falling apart at the end. Oh, baby. What's that? Why is it red?
Have a peaceful rest of the night.
A peaceful rest of the night. It's a morning for the rest.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Okay, just this one?
That's the one. It ain't the 2. It's the you got to hit it and then you got to hit the.
I'm trying to.
Baby, come on now. Woo! I love you. Y'all have a good night. Oh. Ooh.